Okay, now let me give some words of introduction. As we told, we are organizing this wetlands event on World Wetlands Day since many years, and this has been always an occasion to talk about conservation of wetlands. It was targeted to the Polish audience, so we were talking about Polish wetlands, perspectives of restoration, etc. And this was the plan for this year as well. But over the last several months, we had yes, I lack words how to describe the problem, but in short and talking about facts, we have a refugee crisis at the Polish-Belarusian border. We had, starting from September, I think, an increasing number of migrants and refugees trying to move to come to Europe. Stopped at the Polish-Belarusian border. This was a political issue between Belarus and European Union largely, but I don't want to talk about the politics. What I want to tell is that wetlands were playing quite a important and bad role in all of this. The refugees were hiding on wetlands along the Polish-Belarusian border. The border soldiers on both sides were actually pushing these people to the wetlands, not allowing them to cross the border, so the Polish soldiers were pushing them back to wetlands again. And for a couple of months, wetlands were present in the Polish media mainly in the context of the refugees suffering at the border and even dying, because several people were reported to have died on the Polish-Belarusian marshes and wetlands. And because of that, we didn't know how to start talking about wetland conservation in Poland again without mentioning that. We had to mention this, but it didn't combine with our usual topics. So that's why we decided to dedicate the whole event to wetlands of the countries where these people come from. And we realized then that we actually all came from there one day. So the wetlands of Africa and the Middle East as the cradle of the whole civilization, and certainly the Western civilization. This is the title. We have a new graphic, which you may have seen on the initial page. And now, Magda, I would like you to start the presentation. So this is a few slides to let you know what was happening and why we decided to change the topic of this event, which I'm very happy for that. But these are some pictures that we are sorry to have to show. It started in August last year, when the first migrant group crossed the wetlands, stopped on the border and were stopped by the border guards. So these are some pieces from the media. This is how actually the area which we report is our UNESCO heritage site and one of the most beautiful nature reserves, National Park of Białowieża Forest, and suddenly, completely unexpected to all of us, this wonderful natural place became the scene of the tragedies. More media coverage of this and from various angles. Some of the media stressed the illegal status of the refugees and migrants. Some other focused on their suffering. On the lower part of the screen, you see the time axis. Some deaths reported on the media. The refugees were from various countries. We initially thought they were connected to the to Afghanistan and the retreat of the American army from there, but suddenly it turned out that they come from various countries of the Middle East and Africa. We had refugees drown in the Bug River, our beautiful border river between Poland and Belarus. We had several dramatic actions, and we had a massive action of volunteers and the local people who started helping them very early. So despite the completely different approach of our officials and our government, the civil society started in large numbers helping the migrants. So this is a place to acknowledge these efforts. And these photos show you how beautiful wetland area the Polish-Belarusian border is. I'm coming to the end of this story. You can see the Bug River on the Polish-Belarusian border. You can see more groups of migrants in the forests and in the wetlands. And in this whole story, wetlands played two roles, actually. The one role was that the refugees were trying to hide there. And the other role was that the border police and the soldiers were using these places, at least at the beginning, quite cruelly for pushing them back to the other side. We are now here, we have winter. All these things is not yet finished, but the new issue actually came along with border wall being constructed and this type of protection facilities that threaten not only people but also nature, also animals. And now I would like to invite for a short talk about this two of our friends, Magda and Kasia. Mm-hmm. Can you tell a little bit more about them?
So maybe I would
yes,
turn off the presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would like to introduce to you Kasia Herz, a filmmaker, artist, foundress of Fundacja Kultura Kresu. You can translate it into English as a Borderland Culture Foundation, a resident of Białowieża, village close to the Belarusian border, who started to be a humanitarian activist of Grupa Granica because of what happened. And the other guest is Magdalena Siemaszko. Magdalena Siemaszko is our colleague from Wetlands Conservation Center. She coordinates one of our projects, which is called Let's Remember About Wetlands. She's involved in many projects and activities. And Magda also is a resident of a Teremiski village close to Białowieża and close to Belarusian border. So she's also an activist of Grupa Granica.
I would like to ask you, yes, I'm not sure which question. What would you, let's say we have a little time to say the world, to say people about what happened on the border. You were helping the migrants and the media coverage was actually quite poor about it. How can you describe it in just a few sentences so that you give the testimony?
In few sentences, I think it's very hard to describe this experience, of course. Main thing was probably that actually, so as Victor said, it started in probably August, mid-August. But the main part, the most tragic part was happening probably October, November, and beginning of December, when the most intense actions, interventions, and calls for help and the most tragic deaths occurred also on the border. And yes, we were involved in helping directly in the terrain. So we were going to the forest and helping people go out of the wetlands and out of the woods. And this was the most intense to see actually the people from totally different climate, completely not prepared mentally or physically for what they were supposed to feel and experience in this forest, especially nature-wise and climate-wise and temperature-wise. So we couldn't imagine what they feel and how they react, coming mostly from the deserts now, right? So this was a shocking experience for sure. I don't know what else would be interesting for you.
I think
Some-
we should say the facts. So how many people?
So from 15 August, I think there was almost 7,700 calls for help to Grupa Granica. So we got so many calls for help, and this was from the whole border area, which is almost 400 kilometers of this border area. So we were covering all this line, and around, for now, as we know, around 15 people were found dead officially, but unofficially we don't know because it's just happened, and then maybe like some bodies are still in the forests. 1/4 of these people that were calling for help were kids. And yes.
Yeah, we also had chance to help people and ask for interim measures. So this is one of the procedures of help. Over 120 people were already helped in this mode with the interim measures, and also much more are already in the detention camps.
Around 2,000 people are in the detention camps. From what we know from the German side, around 11,000 people managed to cross the border through the forests and get to Germany. We don't know how many people were left on the Belarusian side, and we don't know how many people are still planning to cross.
And we also don't know how many people died in the forest.
Exactly.
And also how many people are still somewhere in the middle or hiding. As we could just track the people who asked us for help, but of course we know that there were much more. And also this is the specificity of this forest, that it's super dense and not well-known area that is difficult to access from any side, actually.
Yes, and on the 25th of January, Polish government started building the wall on the border. The wall that is covered by the Polish financial aids, however you call it, and it's gonna be 186 kilometers of the border side, almost 6 meters tall, with some electronic surveillance and drones flying above. And of course, it's gonna have horrible environmental implications, as you already said before.
And Hans was asking about the situation on the Belarusian side.
Yes, so the situation is changing. It's also the political issues, so it's difficult. If we don't want to get into these political discussions, maybe that's not the moment to discuss it, but we know it changed the situation. So last 2 months, people moved back. We know about people who moved back, but we don't know what are the plans for next month if they don't want to come back here again to the border. So the situation on the Belarusian side is changing depending on the politics, let's say, and depending on the decision from Minsk also. And the most, the biggest numbers of people in Belarusian side were stuck in the November mostly. And then it changed a bit, but it's still happening. I mean, there are still guards who are keeping people on this Belarusian side, and also push them in the Polish side, yes. So
Maybe we should add to our foreign guests who may not know it that the zone around along the border is a closed zone since when was it introduced? Since September, I think. Or,
Yes, September.
so it's officially only the local people, inhabitants of the zone, can be there. It's a zone with the emergency state announced. Very difficult actually to penetrate also for journalists. So the information from the zone is quite limited. But I really want to acknowledge the efforts of the volunteers, and we have medical aid, we have doctors working them, we have volunteers bringing food, bringing survival equipment to the migrants, and lawyers helping them to get the asylum in Poland or generally in the European Union. So this is a moment to acknowledge this.
and also local residents. I think that's super important to say that because of this border, the zone that it's closed zone, the people who are actually helping mostly within the zone, these are people who normally live here, and these people, as Kasia, for example,
It's around 200 people actually that are part of the Grupa Granica from the local residents that are helping.
and Białowieża district has 2,000. It's like still little village, so it's really amazing that most of the people used to have normal lives before, and now most of them are helping. So, yes.
As Kasia told, now the humanitarian issue and nature conservation issue is starting to merge, because we have this border wall being built in the heart of the really one of the most important nature reserves in Central Europe. But as we decided not to talk about conservation issues, nature conservation issues in Poland, I thought, to me, Polish wetlands are in mourning now. So we will keep silent about that now. Thank you very much for your report. I want to say that we still, the migration issue and refugee issue is something new to us in Poland. It is, of course, the phenomenon happening for many years, and it will increase. And there were many moments in the history when migration was our main activity. So this will also be part of our story. My intention, or our intention in Wetland Conservation Center about this event, was to forget about the borders. Yes, to show that if you have an important topic like wetland conservation, and it is an important topic, although some people may find it like a very special niche, then you can forget about the political borders, and we will show that we have all the same problems in different countries, and that wetlands are utterly important for human livelihoods, but also for nature conservation in different parts of the world. So,
And the wetlands do not know the borders.
wetlands don't know the borders, and they should not have the borders between them.